Oh, it's lovely to see everybody and somebody sitting at this table this week, which is great. Great to see everybody. And today we are continuing our series on the miracles of Jesus. And I've entitled this one, Lost and Found. And it's about the woman with the issue of blood. And I'm going to be talking about three things: how she was lost, and then she was found by Jesus. She was lost in Judaism, she was lost in the crowd, and then she was found by Jesus. So we're just going to get started with this. You know, I don't know about you, but yesterday I came to drop something off in the kitchen, and as I walked down the stairs, I saw all the stuff from the lost and found, you know, the lost property, and I thought, no one's claimed this, right? That's it. So I took 2 big bags, put them in there, went up to somebody cares and dropped them off there, and got rid of them. And I found another bag, which is over there, and I thought, whose bag is this? So it's a really nice bag. Maybe I'll take this myself. No, it was a really nice bag. So I opened it up, and inside was football stickers. I mean, I've got lots of grandsons. They worship football stickers. And I thought, this is great. Someone has left this. I could use these football stickers. I thought, this will be a very precious thing for somebody. Then I opened a little pocket inside. There was a whole bunch of Band-Aids and plasters, and there was a Kit Kat. I thought, this must be a mum that when she plasters up all the kids, and and she gives them a Kit Kat as she's looking after their wounds. And there was no indication as to who it was. So I just left that bag because I thought, no, that is somebody's. They will come back to claim it. And then I took the stuff up to Lost Property, popped in to see Julia, dropped something off there, and she had some friends visiting. I won't say who the friends were, but there was a couple of friends visiting. And I said, do you know somebody that's lost football stickers and a lovely bag? And this girl said, yes, I've been looking everywhere for it. I thought, have I lost it on holiday? Have I lost it here? And she had left it at the encounter night or something. And I said, well, you're very lucky that I didn't just keep the bag myself, give the football stickers away. And I was thinking to myself, lost and found. That's what this lady is, lost and found. You know, she's talked about the woman with the issue of blood. And you just think to yourself, imagine that's all she's known as. When we bump into her in heaven, we don't know her name, we don't know anything about her. We're like, you're the one that had the issue of blood. Anyways, so although she was lost and found, she was found by Jesus. So I'm just going to read the story here, and then we'll get started. Immediately, when Jesus was with them, a huge crowd followed, pressing into him from all sides. So I want to start what happened beforehand. So we've had the feeding of the 5,000, and you know what that miracle was like. It was amazing. The feeding of the 5,000, everybody was fed. There was 12 baskets left over. And after that, Jesus said, right, we're going to go across the lake. And so he said to his disciples, you go on ahead. I'm just going to climb this mountain to pray. So Leanne spoke about that. So he climbs the mountain to pray, and they go across, and they're in this storm. And he can see from the top of the hill the storm they're in. And Leanne wonderfully shared that whole story. And then when he gets across there, he meets the man that's full of demons, and he doesn't know what to do. He's in a cave, he's slashing him, he's living in a graveyard, slashing himself, and Jesus heals him and he's set free. And then it says after that, Jesus then said, right, let's go back across. And when they went back across, it said there was a huge crowd. Now in this small passage I'm going to read, it says 9 times huge crowd. So guess what? It was a huge crowd. So it says it because it was unusual to have such a large gathering there. So that's where the story is. So Jesus has now come across and he's there. Now in the crowd that day was a woman who had suffered horribly from continual bleeding for 12 years. She had endured a great deal under the care of various doctors, yet in spite of spending all that she had on their treatments, she was getting worse instead of better. When she heard about Jesus' healing power, she pushed through the crowd and came up from behind him and touched his prayer shawl. For she had kept saying to herself, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, if I could just touch his shawl, I know I will be healed. As soon as her hand touched him, her bleeding immediately stopped. She knew something had happened inside, for she could feel her body instantly healed of the disease. Jesus also knew that someone had touched him, for he felt the power that had always surged around him, pass through him to somebody else. He turned and spoke to the crowd. Who touched my clothes? The disciples said, everybody touched you. What do you mean who touched you? Look at this huge crowd. They're all pressing in and touching you. We're trying to make a safe passage for you. Everyone's touching you. But Jesus' eyes swept across the crowd, looking for someone who had touched him. When the woman who had experienced this miracle realized what had happened to her, she came before him, trembling with fear, threw herself down at his feet and said, I was the one who touched you. And then she told him the story of what had just happened. Jesus said to her, daughter, because you dared to believe, your faith has healed you. Go in peace in your heart and be free from your suffering. So it's an amazing story that this woman, this woman is in this crowd. So she obviously wasn't there for the feeding of the 5,000. She must be nearby. She must have heard Jesus fed people. She thought, that is insane. How do you feed somebody from nothing? So she must have heard about these stories. And then he's gone across there and something's happened there and he's come back. So she's thought to herself, if I could just get in his way. And he had gone across, he came back. So she's thinking, he's back. Oh my goodness, this is my chance. So she's excited. Something could happen. There is no story in the Bible about somebody being healed from continual bleeding for 12 years. So she doesn't know anything. She's acting on her faith. She's believing, well, if he could feed the impossible, if he could do this, maybe he could heal me. It's not like she had an illness that she's heard the stories about how miracles had happened in the past. So she doesn't know that Jesus could heal. I also think it's really interesting, in that crowd, in that huge crowd that was there when Jesus arrives, Jairus is there. And Jairus is the head of the synagogue. He is right up there. He is one of the guys. In fact, maybe Jairus was the one that said to her many years ago, sorry, you're unclean, stay away. We don't know. But Jairus was there, and he says, and he pushes through the crowd, Jesus, my daughter, she's ill. She's dying. She's 12. Please come. Jesus said he was moved with compassion, and he said, okay, I'm following you. So actually, Jesus is turned around and he's following Jairus. So Jairus is like, move away. And he's pushing his way through the crowd. Jesus is following behind him with people. And it said everybody was following because they want to see, is Jesus going to heal a 12-year-old? What's this about? He's the man of the synagogue. So they're watching all of this. And in that crowd is this woman. And she just thinks, if I can just press through. And so she is following this crowd. There's three simple things. The first one, hidden within Judaism. So this lady has no name. We don't know her name. And all we know is that she was shamed and embarrassed. Back in Leviticus 15, it speaks, and I had the verse in my Bible in there, but I was going to read it up. I'm just going to speak it. But in Leviticus, when all these laws were given, it's like, if a woman is on her period, she is unclean. Everything she touches is unclean. She has to stay away. And after her period, when she's a few days have passed, then she can go and present herself, and then she can come back into society. Thank goodness we don't live in those days. So this woman then also speaks about, if someone is bleeding and it's not her monthly period and she's bleeding on her own, she is unclean. Everything she touches will be unclean. So this woman has been condemned by the religion she's lost in. She's a Jew, and she has been condemned to a life of away from everybody, ostracized. She's a social outcast. She's embarrassed. She's shamed. Oh, don't touch her. Don't go near her. It doesn't also mention her age. I began to think about her age. What if she had just been a young girl and was newly engaged? If she had been newly engaged, do you think her fiancé would have been waiting 12 years later? No, he would have given up and gone away and found someone else. What if she had been newly married? So excited, she's newly married. well, our husband's not going to stick around. I can't have sex with you. We can't be intimate as a couple. We can't fulfill what we're meant to be as a couple because you're bleeding. He's not going to wait for 12 years. That's grounds for divorce. So if she had been newly married, her husband probably wasn't around. Maybe she had been a young mum. Maybe it was after she had children. And now this bleeding has not stopped. And now she's watching other people care for her children. She's desperate to be a mum. She's desperate to care for her own children, but she can't. What if she was a menopausal lady? What if it's later on in life, she's got teenagers, her kids are getting married, she's not able to be involved she's not able to attend her children's weddings, she's not able to look after her grandchildren. Whatever stage in life she is, it doesn't mention her age, but you think of every stage in life, she is not able to get involved in anyone. And so she is living within Judaism, and she is trapped. She can't go anywhere. She can't work. She is having to live off other people's work. Maybe she's working from home, but it says anything you touch your hands, you are unclean. So she is unclean and she's living at home. She is living in terrible isolation. It also says that she's living in constant pain because it says she endured a great deal at the hands of medics. She's probably subjected her body to all sorts of treatments. Oh, why don't you try this herbal medicine? Why don't you try this? Why don't you bathe in ice cold water? All the old wives' tales. She's tried everything and nothing is working. Her physical frame and her constitution has been weakened. You know what it's like when you're on your period? You're just tired those days. You're weakened. You don't feel the same. You don't have the same energy. Imagine doing that for 12 years. She's financially ruined. It says in the Bible, she spent all her money on cures and nothing worked. So she's financially drained. Maybe she had been given, I was thinking if she had been a young woman, maybe there was some money set aside for her wedding and she's thinking, well, what's the point? Maybe she's burnt her bridges and spent her dowry. I mean, I'm just thinking these things, We don't know. But she has actually, she has no money left. She's a social outcast living in a community where everybody lived together. You could be a social outcast in Aberdeen and actually nobody would even notice because people live on their own nowadays. They've got all their own things. You can go shopping and not speak to anybody. You can do your shopping, you can go to the self-checkout and leave. You don't need to mingle with anybody. But in this community, everybody knew everybody's business. Everybody lived in a tight-knit community, and she can't be there. She can't mix with that community. We live in a day where we've got wonderful sanitary products. She probably, in those days they had nothing like that. She had her own, they had cloths and they would wash these rags that the women would wear and wash them out. Imagine washing your dirty rags of your blood for 12 years. And every time you're washing it, thinking, is this ever going to change, Lord? Is this ever going to happen? Her identity is swallowed up in the woman with the issue of blood. That is her identity. That's what she's known for. That's who she is. No intimacy, no hugging, no kissing, no hugs from nieces and nephews or siblings. That is her life. She's unclean. There was a really interesting study done many years ago, and they would probably never get off with doing this. It was probably in the 60s. All sorts of wild things happened in the 60s, but they got 2 sets of babies in an orphanage, and they said to Group A and Group B, right, you people looking after Group A, we want you to feed the children, change their nappies, but don't speak to them. Just do the minimum, keep them clean, keep them fed. This group, we want you to keep them clean and keep them fed, but we want you to talk to them, laugh with them, giggle with them, tickle them, have fun with them, play a game with them. And they did this experiment over a few weeks, and then they weighed the children. These children in Group A survived, but these children put on weight. They thrived. So you see, she has lived in a world where she's surviving, but she's not thriving. She's not thriving in any area. She is living in this isolated way. And so, I am amazed that a woman like this who has had so much pain, so much isolation, she has a faith. Isn't that amazing? I think I would have been bitter. I think I would have been annoyed. I would have been really angry at God. I would have been so annoyed. Talk about mental health. Talk about, the anguish of the mind and everything. I think I would have been so sarcastic. Really? Jesus healed people? I don't believe it. I think I would have had a bad attitude. But it says she had faith, and something in hearing about Jesus stirred her faith. So I think that's amazing. It says, for she kept saying to herself, if I could just touch even his clothes, just his outer clothes, I know I'll be healed. And another version says, if I could just touch his robe, I would be healed. Judaism had kept her hidden and isolated and hidden within the home, but her faith is about to be stirred up, and her faith is going to do something, And I was just thinking, Judaism kept her hidden. The doctors had ripped her off. Her family, she felt she was a burden to her family. She didn't know who to turn to. She can't turn to Judaism. She can't turn to her family because she's a burden to them. She can't turn to the doctors because they can't do anything anymore. She can't turn to Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, because he's got no power to clean her or heal her. In fact, he's overwhelmed with his daughter and their anxieties. She can't turn to anyone. Only Jesus. And sometimes when we come to the end of ourselves, we think, who can I turn to? And it's Jesus. So the second thing is, she's hidden within the crowd. She's hidden within the crowd. She had heard about Jesus' healing power, and it says that she pushed through the crowd and came up from behind to touch his outer robes or his garments or his clothes. She was hidden within the crowd behind a veil. She probably had a veil on. They would often have veils in those days. So she would have been very unnoticed. So she thought, if I go out there, I can't be noticed. I can't be seen because somebody would shout out, hey, you're unclean. What are you doing out of the house? What are you doing here? So she would have hidden herself well behind her shawl, and she could hear Jesus. She could see him in the distance. She could hear, and she thought, if I come up from behind and if I could just touch, I was thinking about Sunday morning here. How many people come to church on a Sunday and it's a big crowd and they're like, I just come to church and I would love someone to see me, but I don't think anybody will see me. Maybe I'll just come and I'll sit near the back, and it's during the last song, I'll slip out and I'll go home. And they've come in with their burdens, they've come in with their problems, and they're going home with the same. They're wanting us to see them. Can we pray that the Holy Spirit enlightens us and says, Lord, who am I going to see in church today? Who are you going to lead me to? Whatever church you go to, do you want me to see and have a conversation with? Who could I help today? And so I just want us to bear that in mind. That's how we can apply, one of the ways we can apply this story to ourselves. She came up from behind. There was going to be no conversation. There was going to be nothing. She was just going to come up from behind. She wasn't going to wait until he said, anybody wants some healing, or do some preach or anything. She wasn't going to wait for that. She thought, if I could just go in, sneak in, and then sneak out, I think what's also interesting is, I went down to the prayer room to get this prayer shawl we used to have, and I can't find it. But on this prayer shawl, and it said, Jesus would have probably worn a prayer shawl, or the garments he would have had these tassels and prayer shawls. And these prayer shawls that Moses stipulated people wore, they had these tassels on them. And these tassels, the Lord said to Moses in Numbers 15, speak to the Israelites and say to them, throughout the generations, make sure that the tassels of the corner of your garment, the tassels on your garments, make sure there's some tassels there on your garments, and some of them might have a blue thread or whatever. You will have these tassels to look at and remind you of the commands of Jesus, the commands of the Lord. And they had 613. They didn't just pay attention to the 10 commandments of the Lord that the Lord gave Moses. They had another 613 different laws. And these little threads would hang from their garments, reminded them. So if they were doing anything and you would look at these tassels, you were like, oh, yeah, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. They were always reminded how they were they keeping the law? Were they doing good? Were they being good Jews? Had they broken any? And I find it interesting that she's going to touch one of these tassels. She's going to touch the edge of his garment where there could be a tassel. All those rules that were keeping her, these were the rules that were going to set her free. It's quite powerful, isn't it? That the rules that had kept her hidden were now going to release her into her freedom. It's ironic that she would touch a tassel, the very thing that's condemned her to a life of isolation, you know. Consider the risks she took. Would you have come out? Now, you know, she took these risks. These are the risks. She has taken the risk of being seen in public. So that was really frightening for her. You know, somebody might spot me. Somebody might see me. She must, you know, she maybe said, you know, imagine in the morning, where are you guys going? Oh, we've heard Jesus coming. We're going to go and see him. She goes, okay, see you later. He goes, yeah, you stay at home. And then after they've gone, shawl on, disguise, I'm going to go find this Jesus. You know, she went to go and find him. And so she's taken the risk of being seen publicly. She's taken the risk because it says in the Torah, anything you touch, you are going to contaminate. So she's thinking, there's a crowd. Oh, Lord, I might bump into people. I'm contaminating people. And if they find out it's me, they'll be so angry at me. So she's actually taken the risk of contaminating people, which will then bring more shame in her family. Imagine, you left the house. Why did you let her leave the house? Look, she's contaminated us. Now we have to live in isolation until we're fully clean and have to go to the synagogue. She is taking, by touching Jesus' hem or touching Jesus, she is taking the risk that she is going to make Jesus unclean. I hadn't thought of that before. She could make Jesus unclean. This Jesus that is doing great things. Imagine the risk. I have made Jesus unclean. Can you imagine the crowds? He was going to do lots more miracles, but you touched him and you made him unclean, and now we can't do any more miracles. You know, she must have thought of all these risks and thought, you know what? I am going to push through. I have lived hidden long enough. I am going to try this. This is my one and only chance. I am going. And, you know, we need to look out for the one person who is taking a lot of risk. You know, maybe that person from another nationality, another religion, who decides to try church, you know, and they're coming, they're hoping no other person would recognize them, so that they might then repeat, you know, say back, oh, I saw so-and-so, they weren't at the mosque, I heard they were at church, you know, or something like that. You know, who is the one person that might come that might bring disgrace in their family by coming to church? You know, might say, you're at church? You go to church? What? You know, so people take a lot of risk coming to church. People take a lot of courage to come. Let's be so inviting. Let's be so looking out for them. So as well as being hidden in the confines of Judaism, as well as being hidden in the crowd, she is now found by her Savior, her healer, her rescuer, her master, and she is now going to be hidden in the cleft of the rock. You know that lovely verse, you know, the righteous will call on his name, you know, that song, you know, it's in Psalms, you know, where you run, and I will run to the strong tower where I am safe. And that's where she's coming to Jesus, where she's going to be safe. So it says, who touched me? So this is the thing here. So Jesus says, as soon as it says she touched him, he knew something was wrong. He knew some power had gone out. He knew someone had been healed. Don't tell me Jesus didn't know her situation. He knew everything about her, because he is God, even though he lived here. He was fully God and fully man. He knew her. And he said, you know, who has touched me? She knew she had been healed. She knew that her bleeding had stopped. She knew she was suddenly well. She knew that. And then Jesus says, who touched me? Do you think you would have put up your hand in that crowd and said, it was me? You've got your healing. You've got everything you came for. You don't need to expose yourself. I think I'd have been like, let's go home. Let's go back. And he said, who touched me? And he's looking around the crowds. Did his eyes catch her eyes? I don't know. But something in her made her say, it was me. And, you know, in doing that, she was saying, it was me. She was actually coming out. And, you know, can you imagine the crowd gasping and looking? It's her. It's that woman with the issue. It's that woman for 12 years. What's she doing out here? Oh, you're beside me. You can imagine, as soon as she said it was me, you can imagine everybody drew back to make space. Oh, the unclean one. Amazing, isn't it? She was found by her Savior. And, it says when the woman realized that she couldn't remain hidden, because she knew, he's healed me, I need to give him glory. She knelt trembling before him in front of all the people, and she blurted out her story. I think if I had decided to come forward, I might have said, it was me, and I would have kept my face quiet. But she now tells everyone her story, which I find amazing. She says, she blurts out her story, why she touched him, and how she's been healed. Jesus looked at her and said, daughter, you took such a risk trusting me, and now you're healed and whole. Live well and live blessed. He is declaring, and I think it's so wonderful, Jesus could have allowed her to be healed and he could have carried on with Jairus, but he wanted to declare her freedom in front of everybody. He wanted to say to Jairus, Jairus, this is a lesson for you. You might be in charge of the synagogue. I'm on my way to your house. But this woman, she doesn't need to come to see you anymore. Because Jesus is called our great high priest, isn't he? He was the one that declared that she was healed, that she was whole. And this is the only time, it's almost emotional. This is the only time Jesus calls anybody daughter. Isn't that wonderful? Daughter is used twice in this chapter. When Jairus speaks about his daughter, and I'm not a Greek scholar, but I was reading in the concordances and things like that. When Jairus talks about his daughter, it's like, oh, my cute little girl, my cute little darling girl, and it's a term of endearment of a little girl. She's cute, she's cuddly. The word Jesus uses for daughter is very different, and he's only ever called one person daughter. So, and this crowd would have known the significance. The significance of him calling her daughter conveys tenderness and affection. Conveys the one for the little girl is tenderness and affection like a little girl. But the one that Jesus used signifies a personal and compassionate relationship, emphasizing his care in her restoration and her dignity. The meaning of daughter that Jesus uses highlights her acceptance into the community after years of social and religious isolation. So the word he uses is saying, no, you're not just healed. You are now fully accepted. You are as good as anyone else here. You are as valuable as anyone else here. And it's the same when we find Jesus. Sometimes you meet people, who have found Jesus in the Alpha Course, and they're like, oh, I've lived such a bad life. I'm like, he loves you as much as he loves anybody else. His love is just like that. We love differently, but not him. And he's saying to everyone there, everyone in the crowd, and he's actually telling everyone in the crowd, you have allowed her to live in isolation. You've condemned her, but she is not. She is a daughter of the King. And so that's what he does. He highlights her acceptance into the community after years of religious and social isolation. I find it's interesting when he heals her in this crowd, he doesn't speak about the healing. He doesn't say, so how do you feel now? What's it like? What was it like for 12 years? He doesn't talk about her past. He doesn't talk about all the labels attached to her. He doesn't also talk about what was it like to live as a recluse or you've been a victim. He doesn't talk about that. He just says to her, you are a woman of faith. He talks about her faith and her present circumstances. He addresses her faith. And he says that she has tremendous faith and tenacity and boldness. He doesn't talk about all those years. There's been a line drawn. That's her past. This is who she is now. She is a woman of faith. Instead, he publicly declares to the huge, huge crowd that it mentions that she is a woman of great faith, and he calls her daughter, and this is the most powerful thing that he could do. He gives her, in calling her daughter, he gives her a new identity just in that moment. We never know her name. We still don't know her age, but she is a woman of faith. This was a woman. Was she there when, I was thinking, I wonder what happened to her after that. She probably got herself a job. Maybe she started getting herself a job going, I am so grateful. I'm going to start sowing into this ministry of Jesus. Was she there in the upper room with everybody else? Maybe she was. Doesn't say who was there. Was she one of the women that went around helping him in his ministry? Was she the one that helped the early church? I don't know, but she is a woman of tremendous faith, and she will never have forgotten. If she was able to have that faith in isolation, then what was her faith going to take off like when she's been set free, you know? So he changed her future with one touch. For so many years, she had been hemorrhaging naturally. She'd been hemorrhaging natural blood, obviously. But she also was hemorrhaging joy because she had no future hope. She was hemorrhaging peace of mind because she had days and months and years of worry and anxiety. She was hemorrhaging community and connection because she lived in isolation. She was hemorrhaging her finances. Everything had gone. No one could heal her. And she was also, her body was becoming weak. But in that moment, Jesus restored her and set her free. And I just think it's amazing. You know, I find it interesting also that Jairus' daughter is 12 years old. And she's been bleeding for 12 years old. Do you know when Jairus' daughter was born? That's when that lady started bleeding. So for all those 12 years, this lady has been bleeding. And this little girl has been growing up. And suddenly, they both collide. These 12 years collide in one moment with Jesus. And Jesus goes and he heals Jairus' daughter. And he restores the little girl back to the family. And this woman has been restored back to her community, back to her world. And they're both going on to serve Jesus. I wonder what happened to Jairus' daughter. I wonder what kind of a woman did she grow up to become. I wonder what happened to this woman with the issue of blood that we all know that's her name. But you know, God did some amazing things. And in those 12 years, you know, she was growing up. And she was growing down. She was thriving and getting and doing everything she should be. She was shrinking. But in that moment, God changed the destiny of both of these women. And I just find it quite amazing that God can do that. The Lord can do that. And I just love that word. Then he said to her, daughter, because you dared to believe, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be free from your suffering. And I just love the word that he says to all of us, daughters, you know, everyone has value. Everyone, he raises us up and said, you are valuable. You have a place in my bride. You know, my bride that he talks about is a church. You have a place. You've got a place to serve. You've got a place to look out for people. You've got a place to connect with people. You are valued and you are important. And that's just what I wanted to leave with you. We've got a few questions on here, and we'll put these questions up. But you know, I just thought it was amazing that I put myself in the picture, and I thought I definitely would not have. I would have got my healing and disappeared. But you know, if she'd done that, they'd been like, "Are you really healed?" And da da da. You know, he didn't just physically heal her, but because she stepped out, I believe spiritually, she went on to another level. She didn't just get a physical touch from Jesus. Because she came out and said it was me, he touched her spiritually, and I think her life was never the same again. I think she did great exploits. Heaven is going to be a wonderful place where we're going to find out what these amazing women did for God.